Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today in this series of upgrading this 1960s energy hog to be an A-rated family home, let's look at another one of those low-hanging fruits that many homes can implement, upgrading their space heating controls. Let's get into it. So what we have for space heating is this old popular 90 kerosene boiler. So 90 standing for 90,000 British thermal units, or 28 kilowatts in System International units. It's vastly oversized for the space. I would guesstimate that the heat loss in the space is maybe 6 kilowatts. And a hot water coil and a cylinder, what are they usually, 8 kilowatts? It's vastly oversized for the space. It works, albeit you'll see I need to do a bit of maintenance to get it to work more effectively. But even still, well, fully serviced up, this thing's only going to be 70–80% thermal efficient. It's non-condensing, so it doesn't capture heat from the flue gases. It's controlled by a simple time clock. So you click on and off little clickers when you want it to run. So it's one program per day. And then there's an internal space thermostat, a clicky on off thing, which is effective. So it does let you set space and time, but it's one timer and one space for the temperature for the entire space. And if you look at the radiators, the heat emitters, there's no real control on them. I mean, you can switch them on and off or try to blend them if you want, but what usually happens is people just blast heat into a space, some heat more than others if the system isn't balanced right, and you just get cycling of the space. Okay, so I think our problem statement, we're coming pretty clear on it, and I find it actually helpful to go back to the Irish Building Regulations, Part L. I think the most recent iteration is 2021, but they give a good steer as to what the expectation is in a modern house, and this is what we ought to have as well. So in the first thing is you want to have automatic control of space heating on the basis of room temperature, and it's interesting there that they're looking for room temperature, not building temperature, room temperature. So that to me is saying that we need to start thinking of doing something in each room. So for example, thermostatic rad valves. Automatic control of heat input to stored hot water on the basis of stored water temperature. Well, we already did that in the last video, so we're not in too bad of a situation there. Separate and independent automatic time control of space heating and hot water. Well, we've done the hot water, and theoretically we do have independent and automatic control of the space heating, but I think we can do better. For me, I want kind of app accessibility. I want to have different programs on different days. Like for example, our patterns on a weekend are different from a weekday, you know, little things like that. So something a little bit smarter. And me being a technology nerd, if it could somehow connect to HomeKit to use with Apple mobile phones, that'd be magic. And then this is an interesting one, shutdown of boiler or other heat source where there's no demand for space heating from that source. There are ways to achieve that. So if we took our existing system and we put TRVs on it, did something fancy, we would shut down the boiler. It has a thing called a thermostat built into the boiler that monitors the return temperature of the water that's sent back from the heating circuit. The problem, however, is if we switched off every radiator in the house and tried running the boiler, we would deadhead the pump, which means that there's no path for the water to get back to the boiler in order to shut it down. So we have to do kind of two things here to overcome that problem. We're going to have a pressure relief valve somewhere in the system so that we can short circuit from the flow and return when all of the TRVs out around the house are satisfied. And that's honestly as much a safety thing as an efficiency thing. And it's just in the context of having a manually controlled radiator system and having a big, huge domestic hot water coil. That was never a problem in the past. but it is now when we want to shut down individual spaces and we have separated out our hot water. So that's one thing. The second thing is those old oil boilers, there's huge thermal inertia in them. They're big old cast iron heat exchangers. You don't want to expose them to too many heating and cooling cycles. So back in the day, they would just switch on and they'd run for a few hours, they'd switch off. And that would happen once per day, maybe twice per day. If we get our automatic controls in the space correct, and it's likely that we will be shutting on and off that boiler maybe a couple of times in the course of a day. You don't want to short cycle the boiler, but you do have to make provision that you'll be switching on and off that boiler. So is there a way that we can kind of address that we don't have sharp thermal cycles where we just switch off the boiler and it has a ton of heat in it that hasn't dissipated? And there are techniques that you can use to apply that modern gas boilers all do. They've done it since, I don't know, the 2000s from what I can see, and also modern oil boilers do. So let's see if we can retrofit something smart there. So that's roughly speaking it, the building regs in the terms of our problem statement and matching it to that. They talk about TRVs. If you do have a space temperature sensor, you know, bear that in mind. I'm not going to do zone valving, which is where you separate, say, the living spaces from the sleeping spaces, are from the south facing spaces from the north facing spaces. And the reason for that is if we're going with heat pumps are much finer tuned to the heat loss of the house, and including the radiators have to be sized quite precisely. And then the heat pump, to optimize the heck out of them, you do weather compensation. So it tries to very, very precisely match the heat loss of the house with the heat input. If we start introducing zone valves, it would be a retrograde step. It would stop the ability of the heat pump to match its load to the house. So with heat pumps, you have to be very patient, and you have to let it work away. And I don't want to in future restrict that by introducing zone valves. TRVs, to my mind, are fine. Some engineers would disagree, but whatever. So we're not going to do space zones. And that's roughly speaking it. And they do talk about a boiler interlock to knock that off. So I think we can do that. So that's the rough problem statement. We're looking for something to control the space in each room, so TRVs, thermostatic rad valves. We want some sort of a smart overall controller to switch the thing on and off, and we want to deal with a way to switch off the boiler when all of the spaces are satisfied, and to do it safely. And we don't want to overstress the big L cast iron boiler and cause it to crack. So let's see what's out there on the market. Okay, so let's see what's out there to satisfy our problem statement. And another way of looking at our problem statement is the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. They actually have a homeowner's guide to heating controls, and it gives a good kind of checklist of, and in plainer language, what you ought to look for. So we need thermostatic rad valves, and the simplest and easiest way to do TRVs, I go onto this Heating Controls Online website, and it's very handy. And you can see there's a wide range of TRVs out there. And the principle is you just twiddle a knob, and either wax or an oil inside it expands or contracts. And that expansion or contraction, I don't know if this will be visible. Maybe I need to get some light onto it. Either way, it pushes up and down this, which then restricts or enables the flow of water. So they're very simple devices. I think they were developed in the 60s or 70s. I'm almost certain Danfoss were the origins of this. They kind of invented it originally. And it's honestly such a simple design. It beggars belief that Ireland was so slow to adopt them. But either way, when looking for these, the only suggestion I'll make to people is Danfoss, the origin of the species, and some other vendors, they have their own proprietary tread pattern, whereas it seems the rest of the industry has standardized on an M30 by 1.5 tread. So once you put this valve on to the radiator, and this requires a plumber or someone with plumbing knowledge and comfortable enough draining down a system, you can switch and swatch heads from different vendors as long as they all use the M30 by 1.5 thread, or you have to use adapters. So I would very strongly suggest, if you are getting TRVs, get one with the M30 by 1.5 thread. Not to say the Danfoss valves are bad, but it's just added complication down the road. In Ireland, a very commonly used one is this EPH controls one. So I suspect we'll end up getting these valves anyway put onto the rads. And what we do for head afterwards, so we'll see. I mean, we could leave the heads as is, and that gives us temperature control in each space. We can set a target set point for each space. That's fine. Or you could start looking at something a little bit smarter. So for example, Lidl, I think, have occasionally these Silvercrest TRV heads, so they have batteries in them, they're powered, and it lets you set different temperature and time set points. So we might experiment with a few of those. I sometimes see them on an Irish secondhand sales site, Adverts.ie, that I use a huge amount, and see if I can pick up a few of those, play around with them. If I wanted to get something that could connect via a gateway or whatever back to HomeKit, I could go with something like on Apple's website here, these Eve Thermo Smart Radiator valves. So that does the time and temperature, but it can also connect via an app. But 94 euros each, I don't think I'll be doing that. We might go, and similarly, yeah, we might go with something a little bit more economical, like these 28 euro intelligent radiator actuator valves that have Zigbee. So at least that's a radio protocol that you can connect back to something. We'll play around with a few of those. What I could conceivably do, if I was really committed to the concept of TRV's temperature control, I could look at something like the Honeywell Evo Home system. And a buddy of mine has this and swears by it. So it is a full-on, where's a nice image, yeah, a nice on programmer controller for your boiler, for your hot water, touch screen, and then it takes the feedback from each space, and you can set different temperature set points in each space, different time zones. Very cool. Does absolutely everything I'm looking for. Only thing is, if I'm going down the road of a heat pump in future, a heat pump will likely have, with its own weather compensation and things like that, its own controller. So I don't want to hugely invest in a super fancy controller if I'm only going to hook it up to an oil boiler for the next year or two. So I think TRVs, in summary, we're going to get these cheapo jobbies, get them put onto the radiators, and for heads we'll play around with either leaving the simple traditional head or something independently programmable or remotely programmable as well. Then moving on, 7-day programmable timer, so that's to control the boiler. We want something smart there that can connect to an app. Obviously, you can do different time zones, different time settings on different days. From looking around, this smart thermostat from Netitmo is HomeKit capable. You sometimes see them for cheap on adverts, about 80 euros each, delivered. So we might give that an old shot. And if that doesn't work, we can always revert back to the old staple from my old house that worked very well, the Nest. That was absolutely excellent. And with enough gateways, you can actually connect it to HomeKit. I found this very, very effective. And the advantage of this is it can source its power to power the Nest using the old wiring in the house from the base station, whereas things like the Netitmo, you have to bear in mind you have to put batteries into it. Foreshadowing. Then with boiler interlock, so this is two things. Number one, you want to have a way of diverting flow even if the boiler if the space thermostat tells you, yeah, you know, give heat, but each of the rooms is closed down. So what I might look for there is just a simple pressure relief valve. They aren't too hard to find, and that will work in conjunction with the thermostat that's on the top of the boiler anyway, to tell the boiler to switch off when the return temperature is basically the same as what it's sending out. It means that all of the spaces are satisfied. And then the second thing I want to do is pump over run, which is pretty straightforward to do. So I think this description is very good. When pump overrun is on, your pump keeps running for a short time, usually 5 to 10 minutes. This function is controlled by either a pump overrun thermostat, keeping it on until a certain temp is reached, or timer. And how I think I actually want to implement that is you just get a second one of these thermostats and you use it. By reading the little diagram on the side, you use it to run on the pump until the temperature drops below a certain set point. And the conjunction of the pressure relief valve and this additional thermostat, jerry-rigged to be a pump overrun thermostat, I think we will get a reasonably efficient, effective system that doesn't overheat the space and only runs the boiler when we truly need. So that's roughly speaking it. In terms of costs, I think I have 9 radiators, €20 including VAT for a pair of them. So what are you up at there? So €11. So 90, €100 in materials here. If we go with the netted mow, I found a second-hand one online for 80 quid, so €180. The additional thermostat, 50 quid, so that's €230. And if we are messing around with these heads, you can usually find them for a tenner second-hand. These things are 30 quid. So maybe round it up to 200, 250 by the time you include a pump, a pressure relief valve, plus fitting. Let's see if I can get a plumber to fit the valves and the pressure relief valve, and I think I'll do all of the wiring myself. So I expect we'll be out of here by like €800 all done by the time you pay a day rate for a plumber. So let's give that a shot. Regarding funding for the heating controls upgrade, there are grants available in Ireland from the SCAI to part fund this upgrade. You know, they see that there is a good amount of energy to be saved here. It's worth €700, and it's important you apply before you do the works and you specify your vendor. The only issue for me that I discovered was you have to get your contractor to tick at least 6 of these to be measures on screen to be installed as part of the grant works, and they can't be either pre-existing or done by the homeowner. So that puts me out of eligibility, unfortunately. So yeah, at least 6 of these items with the asterisks have to be newly installed as part of the grant works and must not be pre-existing. So it's just something to bear in mind. Like, yeah, I'm doing this. I've effectively done that. You see, it's a shame that they're discouraging homeowners from taking these on by themselves. But we persevere. Let's see how we get on anyway. So what are our initial thoughts and feedback after operating this for about the last month or two? So looking at the different components, the main programmer controller, the Netimo, it sadly didn't work out for us. It had some weird technology problems. The relay, when we had it located out by the boiler and it was switching on and off the boiler successfully, it wasn't maintaining Wi-Fi connection adequately, despite the signal there being quite strong. When I then moved it back indoors and used the Netimo thermostats functionality to switch on and off the boiler, it ate batteries. 2 days for alkaline batteries, 4 days for lithium single-use batteries. It's, apart from the sustainability hit of just burning through so many batteries, it was just not a viable solution. It's a shame because the app and the software with the lovely charts, I think I included a clip of one, was beautiful and you could really understand what was happening. We switched to the Nest. We had used it in our prior home and it's excellent, and it also has a feature whereby you can recycle the old cabling that linked the original thermostat position with the boiler in order to power the Nest thermostat. So that is a very elegant solution. That thing will operate for as long as we need it to operate. The app isn't as wonderful as the Netimo's in the reporting functionality, but in terms of every other feature, it's excellent. The TRVs, so we went for good, best, better, best. So good were the old traditional wax or oil filled ones. I think they're all oil filled these days. We put them in infrequently used spaces like hallways or the side converted garage, which is just a logistics space for us at the moment for another project. Works very well in that environment. In terms of the better option, we had ones with inbuilt timers, like the little Silvercrest ones, or the I think it was a Honeywell standalone battery powered one. We had to get rid of the little ones because they just started hunting randomly, open and closed, and it can be quite obtrusive noise wise. The Honeywell one seems to be working quite reliably, albeit it has a weird quirk whereby it can't continue a schedule period past 12 midnight. You have to do it on a day by day basis, which is great, but it means that the thing will cycle open and close around midnight if you want it to be open and then to stay open, which can be a bit obtrusive noise wise. In terms of best, we did the Zigbee attached ones. I'm still twiddling with those. I haven't got them working correctly with Zigbee yet, so I think a little bit more twiddling there. I can see the appeal of the Honeywell Evo Home all-in-one integrated system, put it like that. Trying to remember different schedules for different spaces can be a bit frustrating. Then moving on, in terms of the pump overrun stat, it works perfect. Rather than the Nest or the internal return temperature thermostat in the boiler telling the boiler it's time to switch off, the pump overrun and a big slug of heat staying in the boiler, the pump overrun stat does exactly what I asked of it. It runs the boiler on for a few minutes and it just helps dissipate out that heat, get the last benefit of that heat in the house rather than heating a boiler house outdoors that is of no benefit to anyone. So it can be a bit intimidating to cable it in, but if you basically follow the wiring diagram for modern oil boilers, you can't go wrong there. And that's pretty much it. It's been a positive experience. Comfort levels have been high. I'm very satisfied with this low-hanging tweak. Let's see the impact on our BER rating.
So we're in SEAI's DApp software again, and the main changes we're going to have to make here are space heating. We're just going to go through what's here. So we still have central heating system with radiators or underfloor heating. That's not changed. Gas oil boiler, standard oil boiler from 98 onwards. The heat emitters are radiators. Now I did have boiler interlock present clicked before because by rights there was a boiler interlock by virtue of there being a room thermostat that once it was satisfied, it would switch off the boiler. We're just doing it in a more efficient way to prevent very long cycles. But what we have updated is we certainly have a programmer, we have a room thermostat, and we have TRVs. So let's just mess around with this a little bit. Let's see what this does. We go from 411, we go down marginally. This one here, that's the same difference. Boiler Energy Manager. That's an interesting one. I can't do that in my case because my boiler is simply 0% or 100% on. I did get a smaller nozzle put into the boiler to reduce it down to a kind of 18 kilowatt output, but you can't use like modulation to turn it down, like with weather compensation or with open term or anything like that, unfortunately, with something of that vintage. But it's basically, yeah, programmer, room thermostat and TRVs. And we do have a delayed start thermostat present. So what that does is it can, if you tell the thermostat what temperature you want at what time you want, rather than, say, for example, if it's a mild morning, but you know you want to be warm at 7 o'clock, so you always set the boiler to come on at 6 o'clock. Whereas if on a mild morning, the programmer should be smart enough to say, oh, it's mild out, I can start a little bit later, because it understands the outdoor weather. So we do have that functionality, and that interestingly drops it by the greatest significance we've seen thus far. We go from 411 down to 406 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. So that's roughly speaking the updates we make here. Just a small bit of errata. I was looking at the water heating, and there's actually a slightly different way of looking at it. I just updated it here. Previously I had cylinder indirect, which was correct, and hydraulic heated, but cylinder with immersion main heater is the right way to do it. And the primary circuit loss type is electric immersion heater. Now, it doesn't then let you select cylinder thermostat, separate timing, blah, blah, blah. It just presumes with an electric immersion heater that you're doing smart controls. So it's a small errata. I just wanted to update it from last time. So we saved, again, a small amount of energy, but every little helps. These are the easy wins. And honestly, this one is more about comfort factor and maintaining good comfort than out and out energy efficiency. So that's pretty much it for the D app. So let's move on and have a look at the project planning. So what I wanted to do was to give an overview of the overall capital works program we're doing here to upgrade this house to be an A-rated home. So we bought an older house in a nice location, and we did budget for the fact that we would have to do upgrades in order to get it to the standard we want. So I want to give an overview of how we planned out the sequence of works to make sure that we don't have any kind of interruption of critical services for the house. We have a good quality of life as far as is possible all the way through, and to make sure that you're not reworking things or going back over old work. So an overview of the house as is. So you've probably seen these shots if you've been following the videos. It's a 3-bed semi-D with an extension on the side. Now the extension isn't very well built. It seems to have been built on top of the party wall, which is a big no-no. You can abut it, but you can't go on top of it, with rotting timbers on the side, a leaky roof, which you probably saw there in the video, me trying to fix around the flue. But it has a good solid structure that you can do a hell of a lot with. This is the rough layout of what we have. On the ground floor, you come in a porch into a quite large hallway. There's a kitchen, there's a large sitting room where I'm sat at the moment, and then there's the converted garage, boiler house, oil tank room to the rear. And then upstairs there's the bedrooms, there's a bathroom. Weirdly, there's a separate shower room, which we suspect there was an old wardrobe there in the past, and then it was converted to a shower room. And there's a very generous attic. So, you know, quite a good state. So what we want to do, we're not going to do much with the upstairs apart from update it visually or things like that. With the attic, we're going to leave it alone for now. The only thing we've really done is put in just a floor suitable for storage and a styro to access it. That's about it. The principal changes will be on the ground floor. So this is what we're starting with, and this is what we want to go to. So we're going to leave the sitting room and kitchen. We're going to ultimately knock them together to have a nice free-flowing open plan space. There's wonderful sunlight that comes in the front windows, and it'll be nice to get that to the kitchen, you know, just at least be able to see that sunlight. The main focus of works will be on reworking the converted garage, turning it into a proper bedroom study with a little bathroom at the rear. We're going to get rid of the old boiler house and replace its door with a window, and we're going to rework the entrance lobby with a draft lobby, which also will enable us to do rent a room scheme in future, or older parents, if they want to come stay with us for prolonged periods, at least we can have, you know, quite independent lives if necessary. And a nice little storage wardrobe. Just a little tip I found from living in Finland a few years ago with the family, that having a wardrobe to deposit all of your jackets and shoes and such like in the hallway is a boon. And I don't know, maybe even put our washer, dryer and hot press there. Still up in the air. So that's where we want to get to, plus obviously all of the energy stuff. So how do you work that out? Many people have many different ways of doing it. My particular technique is to forget about Gantt charts. They can come later. What I like to do is do a nodes diagram, and it can be hugely overwhelming at first, but the way that I've kind of come to rationalize how to do these things in my head is, what can I start immediately that won't impact anything else? So I put them on the left, and then I work out what has the most dependencies on other things, and I put that on the right. And then you kind of iterate and make a nice juggle of things in the middle. And I found that that works well to make sure that you're not without anything for a long period of time, or not reworking things. So for example, if I want to have a heat pump installed, it has principal dependencies on three things from what I can make out. Number one, you need to have your external insulation there, because I don't want to size a heat pump for the heat loss of the house as it stands at the moment, because it will be vastly oversized. It is dependent on having the electrical consumer unit replaced. It is and it isn't, but it would be best to have the electrical consumer unit ready to take the additional load of a heat pump. You know, just a good big way to take the breaker for it. And you would want to have your heating controls upgraded, suitable for this, and, you know, separate out the hot water, do whatever the heck you're doing there. So then you start working your way back. What do you need to do prior to that? For external insulation, you need to have windows and doors fitted, because we're going to be replacing the windows and doors. So it's an ideal opportunity to move the windows and doors out to be flush with the front face, and then you can overlap your external insulation onto it. One little thing, we're going to be reconfiguring, replacing some external doors on that converted garage with windows and vice versa. So you want your insulation to wrap around that neatly. So to do that, what you need to do, I need to fix, there's some issues with the porch floor. We need to have our OPEs in the kitchen wall for external doors cut, which means we lose the use of our kitchen. And then you work that back. That means I need to have a temporary kitchen somewhere. So you just work your way back and figure out the relationships. What enables what? What means you're not impacting on anything else? And you can get lost in it, but it is a very valuable exercise. And when you decouple schedule constraints from this, it can be a valuable tool to understand dependencies, to make sure that you aren't leaving yourself, that you're going to get caught out. And also what I like to do is, spoiler alert, mark what I've done, what I'm in the process of doing, and what I've yet to do. And it's very handy to keep track of things, and also to feel that you're making progress in things. And these things, you know, they just move around very easily, and you can relate this, you can just pull that to there, and, you know, there's different things you can do. Although that's not related to that. So there are things, and it's not hard and fast. You don't have to follow this. For example, solar PV done. The consumer unit wasn't upgraded in order to accommodate it. the chaps just fitted an adjacent little sub distribution board. It's a fine thing. I can go back and replace my electrical consumer unit and just tie in the solar PV then. It's no biggie. It's just what's optimal and, you know, a bit of flexibility. But then when you want to move from the node diagram, the logical chart, to the actual, how the heck am I going to do it? That's when you now need to start thinking of Gantt charts, phasing, contracting strategy, things like that. So this is the scope of work document. And what I like to do is I like to lay out the different phases that I'm going to attack things in and just group things together. Like, you want to have big enough scope that a trade contractor or builder will see that it's worthwhile enough to take on the work. They can make some profit on it. You don't want to do onesies and twosies. And similarly, for your own sanity, you want to have a significant amount of work done at the end of it. So this is targeted at an individual trade contractor, a builder who would bring in a plumber, electrician, tiler, all those kinds of trades. So in my particular case, we split it up. Phase 1, you didn't need planning permission. It means that in parallel, for things that do require planning permission, you can get that in parallel. Then you move on to your later phases, which, if you compare to what's going on here, you're going to start getting over here. And then ultimately you get to phase 4. That's future, dark, distant future. Don't worry about it. So that's just a particular way that I found to scope up works, particularly for these messy things that have interactions. Other things you can go off and just do individually without having a full scope of works for a trade contractor. For example, solar PV, it's unusual, but that was dependent on practically nothing else. So why not just get it done? Which we did. Oil boiler service, just get it done. Attic flooring, attic styra, just get it done. It didn't have any dependencies. And those types of things, they're good to get out of the way. Another thing as well to bear in mind when scoping up your works is we're in quite an inflationary environment at the moment. Labour is going up, as is cost of materials. Materials, as long as you can store them, generally they don't go bad, so no harm to be buying materials sooner rather than later. You'll see in a later video that I set aside our converted garage space for logistics, just to hold a ton of materials. And you can maybe get a bit clever with inflation, and will there be then recession, cost of labour might reduce. So there are different things you can do there. So if you can kind of, when you're phasing things out, put labour intensive stuff later, you might win, you might lose. So that's pretty much it. That's how I put together a plan for a project. Let me know, how do you guys do it? Are there any kind of comments or techniques you found that worked? This was my video about heating controls upgrades. It's a low-hanging fruit. It delivers huge comfort benefits to my mind, and it enables us to get very far in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and next time let's have a look at something really cool, solar PV. Thank you very much. Goodbye.